Hey everyone, Mark Edward Willows with you here, and welcome once again to Gabbin. I have this evening a very special guest that I am excited about. Just listen to his resume. This is just briefly former writer at Paramount Pictures, former writer at 20th Century Fox Television, former box office at Roundabout Theater Company, former writer, producer at Sony Pictures Television, worked at the entertainment industry, and worked at Warner Brothers. And joining me is Mr. Stan Zimmerman, and he wrote a book about this, which we are going to talk about. But Stan, I think first I need to ask you, you were one of the writers on The Golden Girls, and that is one of the most iconic programs around today. I mean, not only do we have the show in reruns, which is still extremely popular. We have the musical, which is playing across the country. You go to stores, there are Golden Girls bobbleheads, dolls, unbelievable. And
Blankets, t-shirts, cards, everything.
yes, everything. And you had the opportunity to work with those four talented ladies on that iconic show. First question I would like to ask you, naturally, B, Estelle, Betty, and Rue, of course, unfortunately have passed on. What do you think would be their reaction today if you writing the book, everything they would see, all this going on from there, probably as they thought of it, little show?
Well, Estelle would be quelling, which is a Yiddish word for just bursting with pride. She became like a mother figure to me, and we would chat on the phone, and she was not afraid of giving advice.
Mhm.
So I'm sure she would have a few thoughts on that, but I think she would just be so proud knowing how hard it is to get a book to a publisher, get it published, get it written, get it published, get it out in the world, and then to have it do so well so quickly. I mean, I'm still shocked that it's on the Amazon, top list of in my category, but still, for a writer, I'm not, you know, um, a big TV star. No one really knows who I am. So
Mhm.
to be in
But
that
writing a
category,
book is work, I can attest, because I need to throw it in. I wrote a children's book.
so you
So
know.
I know, and I had to go through illustrations and finding an illustrationist. That was a chore in itself. So, like I said, yes, writing a book takes time. Now, you've been involved in many shows, and I have to say, I love the book, The Girls from Golden to Gilmore. And of course, we are
I'm
talking.
gonna show it every time you say it, or I should like do a shot of tequila.
Yes, but probably both. And of
Okay.
course, we are talking about the Golden Girls, and you also were a writer on the Gilmore Girls and Roseanne and many other shows. And one of the things that I love, you and I kind of have this in common. I was like you. I didn't play much with kids. I pretended I was in entertainment in the house as a little child. And I think this is something that you did. Now, did you ever think in your wildest dreams back when you were a kid that this is where you would have landed up?
Yes, of course.
Oh, okay.
I did. I mean, I was just talking to an old friend from elementary school who read the book and she contacted me. So it's really cool to reconnect with people. And I was saying, like when I would be on the set of Golden Girls or at Jane Fonda's house, there's one part of me that is like, how the hell did you get here? And the other part of me is like, of course you belong here. Like, why wouldn't she want to, be talking to you and hear your ideas? So being a Libran, I can carry both of those at the same time. But I was always taught by my parents, especially my mother, that you can get anything you want if you strive for it and you work hard. So I was always working hard. And it was funny because when she would run into my writing partner at the different tapings, I guess my writing partner, the first thing he'd always say to her is, "Your son makes me work so hard."
Now, you obviously grew up in Detroit. Now, that is miles away from the Hollywood Boulevard. How did you sort of trek your way out to California?
It was a roundabout trek. Growing up, I always thought I would come right out to Hollywood. Was thinking maybe I'd go to college at UCLA or USC. I just wanted to be near Hollywood. And for our 13th birthday, our parents said, you can go anywhere in the world and we'll take you for, a couple day trip.
Hmm.
My brother picked Israel. Anywhere in the world, I picked Hollywood. And I just had to see it from my own two eyes. And I was very excited, obviously, being here. But then I went to a summer theater camp in Hampton, New Hampshire, and they said if you're serious about acting, you got to go to New York. Like that's just the place to go.
Hmm.
So suddenly my mind was like, oh, New York, yes, because I've been studying acting since the age of 7. I thought I was going to be an actor. And so I auditioned to get into NYU, and I luckily got in and scrounged for money and did work study to pay for it and went to NYU where I met Jim Berg, my writing partner, and we started just making each other laugh and talking about our love for television and film, and we had very similar sensibilities. And for
Hmm.
some reason, we said, let's write a pilot. And so we wrote a pilot, and we just started writing and writing and writing all during class, between classes,
Hmm.
and got an agent in New York, and the agent sent it out to LA, and somebody responded to it in LA, who oddly, and maybe it's not so odd, was best friends with my boss in New York in high school. Like, what are the odds of that?
Hmm.
It was very interesting. I was watching a documentary that's coming out called Into the Night, talking about death and life. But, some people believe that your life is written, some religions believe your life is already written before you were even born, and then you just live what's the path is already created.
Hmm.
And when things like this happen in my life, it's like, how did that guy get my script, really like it, become our mentor, and he was best friends in high school with my boss? I mean, all these little weird things. It feels like
Hmm.
someone up there is playing connect the dots.
Life has a strange way. Now, when you were in Detroit and you were doing all this and you made your way out to Hollywood, is Hollywood today everything that you thought it would be?
Well, I went through many things. There was, months and months and months of being alone out in the valley. My friend that I was staying with, he was off to work, and I was just sitting there waiting for the phone to ring and sending out scripts and calling people, and nobody was responding. And it
Mhm.
was very, very, very lonely, and I didn't have many friends out here. And it really took a full year for things to just click as far as all of that was concerned. Um, yes, I mean, I've gone through great experiences, and I've gone through unemployment and,
Mhm.
not being asked back for certain jobs, of having disappointments of pilots that I made not going to series. Um, and, it's just picking yourself up and figuring out what the next step is, or reinventing yourself,
Mhm.
which I've had to do
Now,
many times.
what is the procedure for writing a script for the Golden Girls? Was it meeting with the creator? Did you meet with the 4 women? Did you meet with no one and you did this on your own? How did you create? How did you come up with plot lines and all? Because, like I said, the writing was brilliant. I mean, it's one of the most brilliant shows I have ever seen. So, how did that all happen?
Well, it starts with a really brilliant pilot written by Susan Harris.
Hmm.
She created those characters. Then they cast 4 of the best women in comedy ever.
Hmm.
And then it's just the gods and goddesses came together and said, it's we're going to make a great show and great writing staff. And we were lucky to be there for season 1 of it. So we were asked to come in and pitch episodes before the show was even on the air. It had just been picked up. Um,
Hmm.
so we came in and pitched our little hearts out, and they didn't like any of them. And we were walking out the door, and I turned around and said, what about if Rose's mother came to visit? And they said, come back in and sit down. We wrote that as a freelance episode. And it's very hard on a series to get outside writers to write a good first draft. That's every writing staff loves a good first draft because then they can fix it, but just getting those words down. So we wrote a really good first draft, and they brought us on staff. In between getting the job and writing, we would go to all the tapings. So again,
Hmm.
we were working hard and diligently studying those characters because nobody knew them. They were all fresh. we could watch the pilot, but then we wanted to see in the first, second, or third episode where they were going, and keep that rhythm and that very specific dialogue.
Mhm. Now, when they cast the four brilliant ladies, what was your first thought when you saw B. Arthur, Estelle Getty, Betty White, Rue McClanahan? Because remember, they're the women that are going to bring your words to life. So, what was your reaction when they picked the four?
Well, I wasn't there when they cast the pilot, so we were not involved in the pilot. We were only
Mhm.
involved once the series got picked up. So the pilot was probably done early of that year, like probably January, February, and then they make their decision in May. I'm trying to think like when I knew. I mean, I must have heard of the show and the actors in it. Well, and then we went and watched the pilot. Um, and then obviously I knew those actresses. I had, grown up with Maude, and Rue McClanahan was on Maude, and I knew Betty White as Sue Ann Niven on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. And my writing partner and I had just seen Estelle Getty, I think a year earlier on Broadway, in Torch Song Trilogy. So I knew all of them. I knew their voices, and we couldn't believe we were writing for them. But conventional wisdom at that time was there's no way in hell that a show about four older women was going to be popular.
Mhm.
So I
Who would
think
have
people
thought,
thought,
huh?
who would have thought? Here we are talking about it 5 billion years later. Everybody knew that it was funny. They were funny, but who's going to watch that? That's what they thought. So people kind of like, okay, put on Saturday night, whatever. Um, and it became a cultural phenomenon.
Yes, and on a Saturday night, which is, the time slot where everybody is going out on a Saturday night, this show made people stay home and watch it. And it was just completely unbelievable. Now, Stan, I want to talk. You also have written for the Gilmore Girls and Roseanne. So, how did all of that come about? I mean, you were one busy guy.
This was over many years. So we got, very popular, obviously, after Golden Girls and that
Mhm.
credit. We went into development with a company called Lorimar that was mostly known for Dallas and Knots Landing, and they
Yes.
wanted to break into half hours. Um, so they had us on a deal to come up with shows. We were offered the first season of Roseanne, and we turned it down because at that time, Laurie Metcalf and John Goodman were not attached to it. I
Mhm.
loved Roseanne. I always thought she would make a great lead of a sitcom. But at that point, they were saying you have to commit to 7 years of your life without really any show to look at. So we were
Mhm.
a little hesitant. Do we give up creating our own shows or stick with that? So we stuck with that. And then later we saw what happened with Roseanne, and the writing was so consistently brilliant, and we just loved what she was saying with the show that we kind of pursued going on it. And we had an agent, Paul Haas, at the time, who was like a dog with the bone. He was just after them, like, you don't understand. These guys are the perfect guys for
Mhm.
for the show. And we had to reinvent ourselves a little bit, and we wrote a Roseanne spec script. And normally, a spec script of a show, you don't get on that show because there's
Mhm.
no way you can know the show backwards and forwards the way the writing staff was. But for some reason, they really liked what we had written, and we went in for an interview. And Jim was very spiritual, and he brought a crystal. We had to go to Roseanne and Tom Arnold's house, and we said we're just going to leave the crystal somewhere in the house as a good luck as a good luck thing. So we would leave the house, and we were just so petrified. We never saw Roseanne. We only saw Tom Arnold. And then Jim said, "I still have the crystal. I forgot to put it in the house." I'm
Oh.
like, "You idiot!" So we snuck around. I'm sure there were cameras, and we threw it over the fence. It worked. We got the job.
Now, when you write an episode of a show, how long does it take to do that 1/2 hour sitcom? Is it weeks of planning, days, hours? How long does it take?
It depends how long you have. If you
Mhm.
have 2 hours, you're going to write it in 2 hours.
Mhm.
Normally, they like to give a little time for you to write a first draft, and then you give the first draft in. Sometimes the showrunner will take that draft and just, do their own thing to it, or what they do, what's called a table, meaning everybody on staff reads it, and we sit around a table and we fix it. If they
Mhm.
have time, you'll go off and do a second draft. They'll give you notes, and you'll do the second draft. And
Mhm.
then sometimes we've been in situations where we don't have time, and every writer takes a scene and we
Hmm.
throw it all together. So
Hmm.
that's the crazy life of writing for a multicam show. You have from Monday from the table read till Friday when you're shooting it. There's no
Hmm.
extra time. Nobody's paying for that time. You've
Yeah.
got to figure
And
it out.
yeah. And you have been involved, Stan, with three of the most iconic shows in history. I mean, how often does that happen to writers? I mean, you are really lucky. Think about it. I mean, these are all
Doesn't
big shows.
happen.
And I always remember I don't know if it was a radio or TV show, but I remember Rue McClanahan saying how she called B. Arthur because B did not want to do the show at first. And Rue had the script and said to her, B, you need to read this script. This is the best thing you have ever seen. And boy, did it ever work, because I would think B. Arthur would be very hard to convince to do a show. I mean, it had to be spectacular for her to come on it.
To do anything. And I have to commend all four of those ladies. You go back and you watch pretty much any TV interview they give, they always credit the writing. They take
Hmm.
the spotlight away from themselves and they say the writing. And I've been on many shows, as you know. I've never had actors be focused on thanking us for that because, we're never seen except for, shows like this now with podcasts. You can
Hmm.
have a face to the writers, but that's why I love going to the Golden Fans at Sea, which is a Golden Girls cruise, which I'll be on
Yes.
next March, which out of Fort Lauderdale. I'm so excited. I've never been to Fort Lauderdale. I've been on a few past cruises and they're fantastic. There's been a Golden Convention, and that was really fun in
Now,
Chicago.
what will be a Golden Girls cruise? Will someone be imitating the Golden Girls? Will they be showing the shows? What will that be?
I will not be imitating them, although I do a really mean Blanche. Um, they've had Melinda McClanahan, who's Ruth's sister, was on.
Hmm.
They've had the Golden Gays, which is a drag group that does musical numbers and
Hmm.
contests and shows as the characters. They've had different panelists. Jim Colucci, who wrote a really great book on Golden Girls. Um, so there, many people have
Hmm.
been on it.
Okay, now we need to talk about the book. All the writing you have done, you would think you'd be burnt out from writing. Now you went and wrote a book. So how did that come about? Is it just
Now
something
I'm burnt out. Now
Yes,
I
is it because obviously the book is about you, your life, your career, as opposed to writing a script.
am.
So, well, how did it come about? It's just something you wanted to do?
I talked about it to answer that question I would always get. How could a guy, and at that point a young guy, write for those older women?
Hmm.
Why do you keep writing for women? And so I wanted to answer that question, and I wanted to celebrate all the wonderful women that have been in my life and that I've gotten to write for. And really, it's a Valentine's to them. Um, and not knowing what the end of the book would be, but it ended up being the death of my mother.
Hmm.
I also decided to use journal entries. I've been keeping journals since college, and I kept a lot of journals and a lot of writing during all those shows and all the ups and downs and the fears. And we're going to get fired. Oh
Hmm.
my God, we were in an elevator with B. Arthur. What do we do? What do we say? Don't say anything. Um, and so I put the journal entries in, and then I could comment on that was what I thought as a young person. Here I am, somewhat wiser, definitely older, and have that juxtaposition. I thought that was really interesting. And it gives it a quality like, we were just hanging out, having coffee or a glass of rosé and telling
Hmm.
stories.
Hmm. Now, your thoughts on television today as opposed to the 80s. What do you think?
That's the end of the question. My thoughts. I love television. I was obsessed as a kid. In junior high, I went to the school newspaper and I said, I think you need a TV column in the paper. They didn't,
Hmm.
but I wanted to write about television, the different genres of television, or little
Hmm.
reviews, or give heads up if something interesting was coming on television. So I've been just obsessed and studying television from a young age. I think it's in a really interesting period. I love one of my friends from NYU days, Michael Engler, is producing and directing The Gilded Age, and with a cast of every Broadway actor ever. And I feel like that's really, really interesting to watch.
Mhm.
I just think, I mean, I loved girls. I wish I could have written for girls and I could have gone Golden to Gilmore to Girls. So I think we're in a really interesting period, and it's not in the days anymore of you had three networks and that's it, and then we have four
Right.
networks. You can create content on your phone. You can create content, download it on YouTube. You can make
Mhm.
web series, which I've done two wonderful web series with some great actors. I mean, I got Mindy Sterling her first Emmy nomination from
Mm.
a web series I made for $25,000, and I had great actors and others, Barry Bostwick and Meredith Baxter and Sandra Bernhard, and so you can be as creative as you want to be these days.
Mhm. Ever look back on your career with any regrets?
One regret is that I didn't go on Soul Train. And you're probably thinking, what? You on Soul Train, right? First of all, I can dance.
Okay.
You'd be very impressed. I did study with Joffrey Ballet, and I did do a show with them with Rudolph Nureyev on Broadway. It's all in the book.
Okay.
Um, but one of the first shows we wrote on a sitcom, Don Cornelius, the host of Soul Train, was the guest star. And they said, "Oh, if you want, you can, go to a taping of Soul Train this weekend." And I couldn't that weekend, and I regret I should have moved heaven and earth. I loved Soul Train. I loved the music.
It was a great show.
Oh, to have been there, like so that, yeah, there are regrets about, looking back at old pictures of myself, and I carried around in my head an image that I was probably the ugliest person ever. So if I could go back and say, "No, you were cute. What's wrong with you? Snap
Mhm.
out of it."
Mhm.
Regrets like that. But I think as far as career regrets, um, no, we just had a great time and we kept learning and changing and growing, and it's all been an interesting adventure.
Great. And what does the future hold for Stan Zimmerman?
Hopefully, a lot more theater. I'm directing a play right now. I just got done directing a play in Palm Springs. I have been directing this wonderful production of The Diary of Anne Frank, which has been going on and on and on. We've done it nine different iterations since 2018. A play called Right Before I Go, which is very different than my comedy work, but it deals with suicide. And I started collecting real suicide notes and put it in a play after a very close friend died by suicide in 2015. And I've been performing it all over the United States, sometimes with celebrities and wonderful actors like Vanessa Williams and Virginia Madsen, and a lot of times with new actors in different cities and states like Alabama. And I just came back and did it in Austin, Texas. And that's been
Mhm.
very, very meaningful.
Mhm. Well, finally, we're just about out of time. Once again, hold it up. The Girls from Golden to Gilmore by Stan Zimmerman. And Stan, tell everyone, where's the book available? If they want it, where do they purchase it?
Oh my gosh, you can get it at Amazon, Goodreads. Just Google Stan Zimmerman and the girls, and you'll find it, and or support your local bookstores and ask for it. And hopefully, I can come to your town and sign them. I love meeting people, and
Mhm.
it would be really cool to pe meet people face to face